Hello, good evening. Welcome to Parent School Partnership with Vivian Davis, and I'm glad to be here this evening. We had a bit of technical hitch, but we're back. We are cool. We're ready to have this evening discussion. Today, we're looking at a very important topic. We're looking at child protection and safeguarding. How can we protect our children? What are the measures? What are the structures that we can use to prevent our children from, being neglected, from abuse, from exploitation, and violence affecting our children? What can we do to protect our children, both at home and at school? So today we are joined in the studio with I have with me two people, but because of network, it's been going off and on having them in our studio. But I have with me Mrs. Shade Fadigbe. Mrs. Shade Fadigbe is a UK-based author. She's an educationist for over many years. She's an educational, as in she's been in the management fair in education for a long time. She's a coach, and she's a children author. She's been writing for children for a long time, and she has worked both here in Nigeria and abroad, now based in the UK. And she's going to be joining the discussion. And again, we have Mr. Achibong. Mr. Achibong is also in the studio. Mr. Achibong is the Executive Secretary of National Council of Child Rights Advocates of Nigeria, a child protection expert and the head of operations, Child Protection Officers, Nigeria. We have Mr. Achibong with us. Welcome, two of you. We are glad to have you. Welcome, Mr. Achibong. You're muted. Can you unmute yourself, please? Your mic is muted, Mr. Achibong. Your mic is muted. Kindly unmute your mic. And we have Mrs. Shade Fadigbe. We want to say hello to our audience, Shade.
Hello, everyone. It's good to be here. And thank you for having me, Mrs. David.
It's a pleasure. Nice to have you too. And today we're discussing something very important. Unfortunately, we still have Mr. Achibong's mic is muted. All right, Mr. Achibong, how are you? I'm trying to unmute him. Let's try and have Mr. Achibong unmuted. Hello, Mr. Achibong. If you can hear me, kindly unmute your mic. All right, very quick one. I'm going to play a video, and with the video, we'll see the state of our nation. With this video, we see the state of our nation and what is being said.
The World Health Organization says more than 275 million children are victims of abuse each year. And the WHO estimates that in Nigeria, about 100,000 children are sexually abused daily. But activists are stepping up their battle against child abuse. Jacqueline Ogo reports from Lagos.
The executive director of the non-governmental group, Media Concern Initiative for Women and Children, or MediaCon, says that in Nigeria, the culture of keeping silent about sexual abuse must be changed. Princess Olufemi Kayode advocates for establishing special offices in police stations where children can freely and comfortably report abuse.
There needs to be a format in which I will not be re-traumatized or more traumatized in being able to deliver that I've just been humiliated or, abused and violated. But right there, everybody's there, and then of course there's mockery, it doesn't help. So the reporting format itself needs to be readdressed.
To ensure such problems are addressed on time, Media Concern Initiative for Women and Children invites the police to be part of its periodic training to make sure they understand the emotional, mental, and psychological impact of child sexual abuse on the victim. Mr. Frank Umba is the Public Relations Officer of Lagos State Police Command.
One of the things we've been doing in this command is what we call naming and shaming. We try to bring these cases to the purview of the public so that people will know that these things happen, and when it happens, that these are the consequences that will follow. We've had much more convictions now than we used to have because the cases are now being tidied up much more better than they used to.
Child sexual abuse occurs more frequently in Nigeria's poor suburbs where residents cannot afford legal help. The Lagos State Office of the Public Defender, headed by Mrs. Omotola Rotimi, is seeking for greater prosecution of child abuse.
It is a challenge that Lagos State government is actually rising up to now, and we are giving it everything it takes to ensure that it is eradicated. When lots of offenders are duly prosecuted, more people will be able to come out to express what has happened to them.
Tayo Fawahimi saw his sister, now 16, being raped by a neighbor from the age of 9 until he met with MediaCon about the case.
My sister, when she was 9 years old, this guy has been raping her. So, up to state that this girl got pregnant for the man. And this guy has no father, has no mother, nobody to help her. The guy denied the baby, that is not the owner of the pregnancy. Later on, the MediaCon came and they helped her.
Representatives of MediaCon visit schools such as Rose Valley High School in Lagos to help students learn more about reporting abuse.
MediaCon taught me that when you want to report a case, you can report to your parents, to your guidance counselor in school, to your teachers, you can also call the MediaCom helplines or any trusted adults, because you cannot keep it yourself, because you cannot handle the case. So you have to report to people who can handle the case, because if not, the person can repeat the same thing.
I've learned to have a good self-esteem and to abide by it.
The Kudirat Initiative for Democracy, one of MediaCon's allies, says it's working also to remove the stigma of child abuse in Nigeria.
We blame the victim and we leave out the perpetrator. And one of the things that MediaCon does, I think to a large extent, is make parents understand that sometimes most times it's not about blaming a child. A child has nothing to do with the fact that she was molested or she was raped or even abused.
Over 20 states have signed the Child Rights Law, which protects the rights of children. But human rights activists say what is lacking is widespread and effective implementation of the law in Nigeria. Jacqueline Ogo, reporting for VOA from Lagos, Nigeria.
All right, we're back. We can hear that it's sort of depressive, but it's good to see that MediaCon is doing a lot of work. But to hear that over 100,000 children daily are being sexually abused in Nigeria is cause for a lot of concern. Now, according to the report we got there, Mr. Achibong, he said over 20 states have signed this Child Right Act. Can you give us an overview of what this Child Right Act is all about, please? Hi, Mr. Achibong. Hello, we seem to have lost him again. Hello, Mr. Achibong, can you hear me? Hi, Mr. Achibong. All right, we'll come back to Mr. Yeah, can you hear me? Yes, I was asking for an overview. Being a specialist in this, what is the overview of the Child Rights Act in Nigeria? Okay, while we wait for Mr. Achibong, now recently about 40 children were adopted as an adult. People in Kaduna, mostly children were abducted in an attack, and it's so depressing to hear that children who have gone to school have been adopted. I don't know, having worked in a school, having been involved in school leadership and management, is there anything you could say that the school would have done differently to ensure that was averted? How can we protect our children against, this kind of situation that found ourselves? How can we protect our children in school?
Well, I mean, there are two aspects to the question that you've asked. The first has to do with how can we protect our children from being sexually abused? And the other phase to that question is, what can schools do?
Yeah, I hear you.
Okay, I'm glad you can hear us now. But Ms. Shadi is just responding to your question. We'll come back to you, sir.
And
do you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now, sir.
We can hear you.
Yeah. All right, go ahead, ma.
Okay. And what can schools do to prevent children from being sexually abused? The truth of the matter is that there's a limit to what schools can do from preventing children. However, we can detect and we can take measures once it has happened. Unfortunately, the system is restrictive. The society, we've got civil societies that fight the battle, that fight in the cause. We've got, we've got federal agencies now involved, but unfortunately, for too long, this has gone on, and the statistics are appalling, absolutely appalling. It took too long for the government to actually even sign the Child Rights Act. I was still in the country when that came out, and you could see that it was just filtering from one state to the other. And I kind of questioned what exactly is disturbing them from putting this bill into action. Why the delay? Why would you even consider, why would you consider giving it second, third or fourth thoughts before you can implement an act? This shows the unseriousness of the government, but it also shows that we don't understand the impact of child abuse, whether it's emotional abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse. We don't understand the impact that this has on childhood. We don't value childhood. And as such, there's so many facets. And, it's one of those conversations that when you start it, you're filtering into so many dimensions. But your question was, what can schools do? We can be alert. We can have policies within our school that help teachers identify signs that a child may have been abused. But we can also make our parents aware that we're watching out for these signs. It's not enough to just have a policy that's hidden away somewhere. If our parents are aware that we do have a policy and we are looking out for their children just to make sure that there is no form of abuse, then that on itself is a tool. So there's a lot of partnership that goes along with protecting the child. There's so much that has to be done.
It is unfortunate that we're having difficulty connecting with Mr. Archibong Anderson, who is directly in the field, working with these children and also working with policymakers to ensure the safety of children. However, being parents ourselves too, what can we do? How can we? Because if you listen to that video, you saw that a lot is being done at home. The young man was talking about his 7-year-old or 9-year-old sister who was being sexually molested at home for a long time. Other things we could do as parents, to avoid this kind of situation coming up, even in the home front.
Well, what we're not told or what we're not brought up to understand is that being a parent is a responsibility. It's not just about getting married and showing the world that you can produce children. You also have to be able to look after those children that you brought into the world. And yes, everyone's got to go to work. We've got to provide for the family. But there's also that huge responsibility of looking after that gift that you have been blessed with. That in itself is a job. And so when we leave our children with people who do not share the same standards as we do, that child is at risk.
That child is at risk, absolutely.
That child is at risk.
That child is at risk. And you know what is happening also. You've watched some videos where we see, children being abused, by domestic staff.
Mm-hmm.
And it's still ongoing. And it's something, people just tend to pick up domestic stuff from here and there without actually doing a background check. And in Nigeria now, we have people who can actually help do background check before you pick up anybody to take care of your children. So what are your advice? Most time parents need this support. They need this additional support. But then, although we also have people like who are uncles, aunties, who are relatives, family members also abusing children. How can we protect our children from people who they trust in the family, abusing them? How can we protect our children from all of them?
Okay. It's a difficult one because we would always need the support of our immediate community, and there's no doubt about
Absolutely.
that. And so one of the things that I think we can do is do unto others what you want others to do unto you. And I'll give an example. If you've if you are somebody who relies on house helps to look after your children, your first rule should be, I need to show this house help that I care about them, or else when I'm not around, that house help will not care about my child.
Absolutely.
So you've got to look at it. So I hear when people say, oh, when I'm going out, I lock my bedroom, I lock this, I lock that. But you don't lock your child away. You've locked your money away. You've locked your gold away. But you don't lock your money away. I mean, I used to find this appalling, when I was still living there, that, you cherish all these other things, but your child that you should cherish more, you've given to somebody to look after. And that person knows that you don't trust them with your gold and your money, but you trust them with your child. So,
I know.
There's a lot. So I think he's back. So yeah, there's a lot that we need to look at. There's a lot we need to look at.
Hi, Mr. Achibong. It's quite unfortunate we're having this technical network problem with you. All right, you can go ahead. Can you talk to us more about child protection and what we can do, Mr. Achibong, if you can hear me? Yeah, we're listening, Mr. Achibong. Like I said, Mr. Achibong is Executive Secretary of the National Council of Child Rights Advocates of Nigeria. He's a child protection expert and the head of operations Child Protection Officers of Nigeria. Mr. Achibong, can you tell us more about child protection and how we can achieve that in Nigeria optimally? Oh, you're still muted, Mr. Achibong. Can you unmute yourself? Unmute yourself, please. Your mic is muted.
That I've done that. They're hearing me now.
Yeah, very good.
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay.
So I was asking if you can.
I was just trying to say that we should just first of all look at the overview of the child Rights Act.
Okay, go ahead.
You say?
Yes, yes,
Hello?
yes. Yes, go ahead. We're waiting for you to handle
Hello?
that. Look at me. Yeah, we can hear you. Let's have an overview of the Child Rights Act, Mr. Achibong.
Yeah, if you're hearing me, if you're hearing, yeah,
we can hear you.
I was just trying to talk about the overview of the Child Rights Act.
Okay.
And okay.
We're listening, Mr. Achibong.
Yeah, I was trying to say that the first thing we look at is, does this children, do these children have rights at all? Yes,
Okay.
they do have rights. And if you look at the Child Rights Act, which is privileges to our children in Nigeria, it does started with the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. And
okay.
Are you hearing me?
Yes, go ahead.
It started with the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. And from there, graduated to have, then as member states, we are expected to domesticate it in our own country.
Okay.
Which and we have the Child Rights Act 2000. Our laws are not concurrent. We need our states to also pass them into laws. So we have some states quite a sizable number of states that have passed it into law. However, in Nigeria, we also recognize that every person below the age of 18 is a child. And we look at the basic rights of the child, which falls under survival, development, protection, and of course, participate, that we should respect.
I have.
Then we also look at the 10 basic rights of children that is everyday occurrence, which has to do with right to life, right to name, right to
It's unfortunate we're not hearing Mr. Achibong the way we should. Great points he's making there, but then his mic is sort of cracky, so we can't hear him perfectly well.
Protection from inhuman treatment.
Mr. Achibong,
me?
You are sort of, your mic is cracking. We are hearing you, but your mic is cracking. So you're not, you're. The mic is cracking, but we can hear you. So go ahead. Can you tell us more about what is child protection then, and how can we achieve that? You've been able to talk about all the rights of the child. How can we achieve that in Nigeria? All right, we'll come back to Mr. Achibong. We seem to be having problem with his microphone, as in instead of cracking. I like the point you made, and I think Mr. Davis pointed it out here. Wonderful insight by Mr. Shade. We can lock our money and our goal from our house support staff, but we can't lock our children from them when we are not around. Absolutely very true. We can't lock our children from them when we're not around. So like you said, we need to learn to take care of those who support our children so that when we are not around, they can do a great job. But then what are the things parents do that can put their children, in danger of being abused? What are some of the things that parents do that can put their children in danger of being abused?
I think sometimes the question that one may want to ask is, why do children find themselves in situations whereby they are abused?
Absolutely.
Why do children get sexually abused? If only we could answer that question. If only we could go through the minds of children, of adults who defile children. If only we could do that, then maybe, just maybe, we're on the way to eradicating it 100%. But unfortunately, we don't know. We don't know why an adult would want to subject a young child, a toddler, an infant, a tween, to, because even if we say that, it's men are being, or women are being seduced, because they're within the puberty phase, and, they get carried away with, they get enticed and they get seduced. Surely not doing. So it's one of those things where it's even hard to comprehend the mindset behind it. But it shows that there's a human will involved. And that will is a choice between right and wrong. And as long as somebody makes a choice to choose wrong, they can do anything. Anything can be done. And there doesn't have to be a reason. It's just the fact that the person has chosen to go on the opposite side and take part in molesting a child, unfortunately. Now, so what can we do as parents? Well, some parents also molest their children, unfortunately.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's true. Yeah, very true.
And so it's this issue about molesting, to molest a person. What does it mean to molest a child? And it's about boundaries. What are the boundaries that you put in place in your home to ensure that your child is not at risk? How do you communicate these boundaries to your family? How do you communicate it to your child? And a lot's gone on about how we talk to children about their bodies, which is very good. How we don't use slangs for the parts of their body, how we talk to them about ownership of their body. And a good thing, one of the young children that we watched earlier on talked about self-esteem. When you've got good self-esteem and you have an idea that you are special, and that you've got the parts of you that are special for you and belong to you, and that no one dare cross those boundaries, then you've instilled key information into that child. You've equipped that child. You empowered that child.
Absolutely.
So the more self-aware and the more significant you make your child feel, there's a higher chance that even if there were attempts to molest your child, and even if, unfortunately, that child does get molested, they would have the confidence or the boldness to let somebody know.
Absolutely.
So it's the work that we do with the child that's important. Yes, a child might find themselves in compromising situations where they're not. I thought this person was meant to be looking after me. How come they're asking me to do that? And once a child knows that they can talk to an adult about the situations they find themselves in, they're halfway there. But if they can't talk to adults, and we carry on with this thing about being fearful of adults, and an adult is always correct. Of course, an adult is not always correct. So once we can get children to understand that they in themselves are powerful and they have the right to say no, that's some, we've always covered some grounds. Yeah, someone asked, why would an adult molest a toddler? We can't answer those questions. We don't know, but it happens. It happens. Unfortunately, it happens. And so we have to empower the child. We have to empower parents. We have to let parents know that there's always somebody that can, that they can reach out to. And a lot of civil society organizations are out there that are, that are at the forefront of things these days, far more than it used to be in the past.
Very true.
So help is arising. But unfortunately, I'll say also, another thing I want to say is that probably one of the reasons is the fact that we lack recreation. When you think about recreation, what kind of recreation do we engage ourselves in as adults? What do? We've got a lot of energy, apart from going to work, come back home. What do? Go home, go to work, come back home, go to church. What physical recreation are we getting involved in? And so maybe if more adults paid attention to physical activities, apart from, the obvious, maybe that energy might be exerted somewhere else. Not a large matter, but definitely something we need to think about.
Very true. I was exploring the term child protection, and like you said, is measures and structures you can put in place. I was trying to read up what UNICEF had to say about it, to prevent and to respond to abuse when it does happen. And that was one of the things that Mr. Achibong was going to talk to us about, case management and reporting and all of that, and I looked at the 5 P's to child protection, and it says prevention, paramountcy, partnership, protection, parental responsibility. Now, parental responsibility jumped out for me, meaning that the parents have a huge role to play in ensuring that the child is protected. The parents have a huge role to play. So that you just talked about the body of the child and telling the child, supporting the child, so that the child knows that this body is special, this part is special, and this part should not be taught. How can we now know? Sometimes we are so busy, even at school. What are the things? What are some indicators in your years of experience to know when a child is being abused? What do we look? What should we look out for You know, you mentioned the child self-esteem. You know, some children may not be able to speak up when they are being abused. But what are indicators that we could look at and say, oh, this child may be facing abuse at home, and we can safeguard the child?
Okay. What is used in the Western world is we use play therapy to identify, you know, if there's a concern, play therapy can be used. You watch out for how children play with toys. You can put toys with different both genders and, you know, informally, and just make it an observational practice without it being formal. Another thing that you could look into is a change in mood. You know, where there's a change in mood, in persona. A child who used to be confident may come into school looking quite dazed and looking faded, looking absent, because something has happened to that child that has confused that child completely. So whether the child is at home or at school, they're in this state of dazed, confusion, perplexed. So you want to watch out for mood. Another thing you could watch out for could also be ailments. And sometimes the ailments, it would not necessarily be the private part. It could be stomach ache. It could be chest pain. And then, you know, you tell the parent, and the child goes to the doctor so many times, there's nothing can be identified. But obviously, because something's happened and it's quite worrisome to the child, any part of the body could be affected. Any part of the body affected. So those are the salient. Those are just some of the salient signs. But play therapy is another one. One thing we don't like doing in the country, but which is powerful, is artwork, drawing.
Okay. Yeah, because children can bring that drawing.
You can tell from the way that a child presents.
Absolutely.
Draw a picture about your family. Draw a picture about the weekend. Draw a picture about what happened. And a child of 3 years old, you could, you know, the child doesn't need to write anything or draw anything, but you can you can look at things that child has drawn to do with her family or his family in the past, and what that drawing looks like now. Are they drawing big happy faces, or are they drawing sad faces? Is one person Yes, is one person really happy and the other person very sad? Is one person, you know, there's so much that can be picked up if we really want to pay attention. But the trouble that we face really is, even when we identify that a child may be abused, what measures are in place within the private sector? What measures are in place to support such a family?
Yeah, absolutely. And that is why it's important that every school should come up with a child protection policy. That is what we don't see in most schools. There's no child protection officer. And if there's any reported case, nobody even knows. And that was why I wanted Mr. Archibald to come on board. But then this is part 1. We're going to be having part 2 of this discussion next week. I believe by then he would have started his technical issues, you know. So because schools need to be also at the forefront of this, you know, by putting in place policy, what happens, what is the reporting line, how should it be handled, how can the child protection, something happened recently in Nigeria and it was thrown overboard about an abuse in school, and the child's face was all over the media and people were talking about this child, the child's name. There was nothing about safeguarding this child, you know, protecting this child's identity. It was all over the media, and you can tell that Yeah, it was a child's mom coming up with this, but then, you know, should it be like that? Are there no ways to still protect this child? Because this child is going to grow up. This child is going to grow up, and these things in the media are going to remain there forever. When the child reads this later in life, when the child watches this later in life, how would the child react to this? How would the child feel about these stories? Well, how, you know, how will it be for the child? So I think we have a lot to do as school, you know, putting in place, you know, a protection for every child who comes in. And parents need to be reassured that the school have taken that into place to ensure that even during recruitment, that we hire the right people. Sometimes abuse are coming from, we have pedophiles being recruited in some schools. How? Why? Because there's no background check done. If somebody comes into the school, you just want to grab the person, hearing that person is come from one other school. There's no background check. There's no, you don't go extra effort to know why did you leave the school where you're coming from to this school. What happened? And is there any story behind this person? I think we need to do all of that as a school to see that we have the right adults taking care of the children so that we don't have our children, you know, molested in any way. You know, we need to have the right adults too who are psychological and emotionally ready to work with children so they're not physically abused too. It's not all about sexual abuse, but then physical abuse of children, even in the school. You know, we need to ensure, you know, like this case that was all over the news recently, that we have put those things in place, policies in place to safeguard our children, you know. And for parents too, you know, we're talking about parents, you need to have that bonding with your child. So when something happened, you know, that you can be able to tell that something has happened. I had a friend some years back. She traveled all the way from Port Harcourt to Uyo to attend to a family who had recently had their child abused because he is a social worker. Their child was recently abused by somebody in the family, and who happens to be the husband's brother. But you know how it happens. The man was now trying to protect his family and shouting, and that the wife should keep quiet, that this is not, you know, but she went in to support that family. And when she got in, she asked, "How did you know?" Asked the mother. The mother said that she was trying to bath the child, and she noticed the child kept going, shrinking, making some noise and some pain. And then she now started, looking at the child, and she found out that the child had been sexually abused. It was a very depressing time for this social worker. Getting back home, and she was talking to her 4-year-old then, and she said to the child, "You remember what mommy has told you? Anytime anybody touches you here," and as she was talking, she said because she knows her child, she knew that something has happened because the child's face dropped and she wanted to say something. And immediately she asked the child, "Oh, have anybody talked to you?" And just as she was asking, a teenage her teenage nephew in the house ran out of the house. So she now knew something has happened while she was away. You can imagine this is a case of a doctor being also in. It's not funny at all. But then that's teenager who was about 19 then has been masturbating with this child. The good thing is that they took her to the hospital. There was nothing. There's no penetration, nothing. But then they could see that this child had some sperm cells around her genital area. So you see, when they say we have over 100,000 of sexual abuse in Nigeria, is a data that we need to look into and look into it properly. So we have a lot of role to play as parents, to be able to know when our children are no longer the excited children that we used to see. When something has changed, you should be able to tell that something has changed. And what do you say about parents? The social media now is now the new movie area. You see people who travel and their location is shown, where they are. We are here. is that good enough for the child? Is that good enough for the family? What do you have to say about that? We're right now in it's XYZ restaurant having a meal, and it's all there spelled out on the social space. Or my child goes to XYZ school, and how do you react to them?
Well, you really want to ask the parents what the motives are, what their motives are. For, I mean, number one, who wants to know about that? Is it your family members that want to know about that? Then share it privately with your family members and don't put yourselves at risk, or don't put your children at risk. But unfortunately, we have, when something is in vogue and everyone does it, and it's some holidays, everyone does it. As long as you know what the consequences are, that you're putting your child at risk, you're putting your safety at risk, go do it, post it everywhere, wherever, go ahead. Don't blame anyone if you then find yourself at risk. Yeah, it's hello, thank you, Facebook user. And yeah, just but what I detect is a parent can choose to do that. I think schools need to be conscious of the fact that children need to be protected within the school environment. And unless you've taken permission from a parent, you shouldn't really be posting pictures of a child that does not belong to you without taking. That's all part of the policies that need to be embedded within a school's portfolio. Yeah, that's what I'll say. I think the flip side to that is when things happen. So, for instance, when you were talking about the mother who, who found out that her child had been defiled and went onto social media, sometimes it's to make sure that the story doesn't get swept under the carpet. To make it's almost like a cry for help, and you really can't blame people if and when there's an irresponsible government for using the measures that have worked for other people. So to a certain extent, you can't blame people when they find themselves in desperate situations.
Very true.
But true, honestly, where there's a responsible government, where there are agencies that could be called upon, there's no point in putting that out on the social media, because at the end of the day, that child is going to grow up, and it would not be nice for a child to find out more about themselves on the internet than they ever knew existed.
Very true. Very true. I'm going to ask us, and let's look at the last question for today. And I believe that when we do have Mr. Achibong, who is on the field, he will give us some insight into how this can be reported, how cases can be managed at school, and what the government is doing, what's the next phase of action, and then how can we identify children who have been, who need help, from his perspective. But let's look at who are the vulnerable children. In the video clip that we watched at the start of this program, it says that more children who live in the suburb, who live in a poverty area, in a poor neighborhood, are those who are more at risk to being abused because they cannot get legal support and help. Do you agree with that finding?
Well, I'll also say that children who live in the suburbs live in communal areas, and adults that are pedophiles would already have been established. So the community has a huge responsibility not to sweep things under the carpet. They already know who is committing those atrocities.
Yes.
And so it's the community responsibility to make sure that they get rid of the pedophiles, whoever they are. So it's a joint responsibility here. Yeah, I'm not saying that, the cases will not be more, but because of the communal lifestyle, they are more accessible to each other. And so, it's a case of choosing right from wrong. Are you going to let the culprit get away with it, or are you going to deal with it, or are you going to deal with it as a society?
Very true.
That's the question.
Thank you. Yeah, very true. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for
You're welcome.
For having for coming on board and this lovely conversation. I'm going to play again as a roundup the video for those who didn't join us from the beginning, so that they can see the states where we are.
The World Health Organization says more than 275 million children are victims of abuse each year, and the WHO estimates that in Nigeria, about 100,000 children are sexually abused daily. But activists are stepping up their battle against child abuse. Jacqueline Ogo reports from Lagos.
The executive director of the non-governmental group, Media Concern Initiative for Women and Children, or MediaCon, says that in Nigeria, the culture of keeping silent about sexual abuse must be changed. Princess Olufemi Kayode advocates for establishing special offices in police stations where children can freely and comfortably report abuse.
There needs to be a format in which I will not be re-traumatized or more traumatized in being able to deliver that I've just been humiliated or, abused and violated. But right there, everybody's there, and then of course there's mockery, doesn't help. So the reporting format itself needs to be readdressed.
To ensure such problems are addressed on time, Media Concern Initiative for Women and Children invites the police to be part of its periodic training to make sure they understand the emotional, mental, and psychological impact of child sexual abuse on the victim. Mr. Frank Umba is the Public Relations Officer of Lagos State Police Command.
One of the things we've been doing in this command is what we call naming and shaming. We try to bring these cases to the purview of the public so that people will know that these things happen, and when it happens, that these are the consequences that will follow. We've had much more convictions now than we used to have because the cases are now being tidied up much more better than they used to.
Child sexual abuse.
So yeah, that is it. And that's the situation.
Statistics.
Interesting statistics, yeah. So we've had over 100,000 children in Nigeria being abused every day, not every month, not every week, every day. So it calls for a huge concern. And we're going to continue our conversation with Mr. Achibong by God's grace next week also, to look at how can these cases be managed. You listen to the video clip, getting the police involved. They say they're not doing naming and shaming, which is a good one. But then how can we also manage these cases within the school? How can we manage the cases at home? How can we take it forward? How can we protect the identity of children even when this is not being reported? How can we protect our children on a social space? How can we protect our children at home and at school? I believe you join me again next week, Sunday, same time, same places, the same social media handles, as we discuss child protection and safeguarding. There's a lot to talk about and there's a lot to look into. We need to keep our children safe. We need them for tomorrow. They are leaders. They are hope for tomorrow. We do want to have children who are dysfunctional, children who have been abused to the extent that they cannot, their self-esteem have been tampered and been affected. We want to raise confident children. I want to begin now. I want to keep our children and to ensure they are safeguarded. Thank you very much for joining us again. And I know you want to hear from Ms. Shade Fadipe, who has joined us. You want to say hello and say bye to them?
Okay, thank you so much for having me this evening, Ms. David. And the conversation continues. See you next week.
See you next week. See you next week. See you next week. Thank you so much. See you next week. Thank you very much. We really hope to have Mr. Anderson. You know, he tries so much to be part of today's conversation, but he had a lot of technical hitches. But never mind. By next week, we hope all those issues will be resolved and he'll be live because he is in the field and he's also in the policy. He's a policy maker. Let's find out what they are doing. Let's find out what his department is doing. And let's find out how they're helping families and how they're helping school. See you same time next week. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.